All right, let's start with Todd.
All right, verse 1. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. You have not yet resisted the bloodshed, striving against sin, and you have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as to sons. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him.
Right. Sherry, can you read 6 to 10, please?
For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his child. As you endure this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Who ever heard of a child who is never disciplined by its father? If God doesn't discipline you as he does all of his children, it means that you are illegitimate and are not really his children at all. Since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits and live forever? For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best they knew how. But God's discipline is always good for us, so that we might share in his holiness.
All right. Go ahead, Don in the lane.
No discipline is enjoyable while it is happening. It's painful, but afterwards there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. Work at living in peace with everyone and work at living a whole life, for those who are not holy will not see the Lord. Look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. Watch out that no poisonous root or bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many.
Make sure that no one is immoral or godless like Esau, who traded his birthright as the firstborn son for a single meal. You know that afterwards, when he wanted his father's blessing, he was rejected. It was too late for repentance, even though he begged with bitter tears. You have not come to a physical mountain, to a place of flaming fire, darkness, gloom, and whirlwind, as the Israelites did at Mount Sinai. For they heard an awesome trumpet blast and a voice so terrible that they begged God to stop speaking. They staggered back under God's command. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death.
All right. Julia and Fred.
Moses himself was so frightened at the sight that he said, I am terrified and trembling. No, you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to countless thousands of angels in a joyful gathering. You have come to the assembly of God's firstborn children, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God himself, who is the judge of all things. You have come to the spirits of the righteous ones in heaven who have now been made perfect. You have come to Jesus, the one who mediates the new covenant between God and people, and to the sprinkled blood, which speaks of forgiveness instead of crying out for vengeance like the blood of Abel. Be careful that you do not refuse to listen to the one who is speaking. For if the people of Israel do not escape when they refuse to listen to Moses, the earthly messenger, we will certainly not escape if we reject the one who speaks to us from heaven.
When God spoke from Mount Sinai, his voice shook the earth. But now he makes another promise. Once again, I will shake not only the earth, but the heavens also. This means that all of creation will be shaken and removed, so that only unshakable things will remain. Since we are receiving a kingdom that is unshakable, let us be thankful and please God by worshiping him with holy fear and awe, for our God is a devouring fire.
All right. Anything pop out at you as you read this chapter?
I like verses 7-9, where it talks about God being his children and how he disciplines us just like, our earthly fathers did. He loves us so much.
Right. I don't know about you, but most of you are parents. Has disciplining your kids ever been fun for you?
No.
Not really. Why? What are some of the things that you go through when you discipline your kids?
Usually we say this is going to hurt me more than it does you.
Yeah, I heard that.
It
And I usually never believed it. But yeah, I heard that too. And so
I can
Sorry.
remember disciplining the girls,
mhm.
and I remember an hour later almost crying because I wanted to go up and give them a hug because I felt so like I did something wrong, but I didn't do anything wrong, but I just felt so bad about it. And I tell Cherry, oh man, I just want to go give him a hug. I just feel so bad, and so yeah,
Right.
it does hurt,
Yeah, and if we as sinful parents struggle with that, I know I want to ask God that same question. What do you go through when you discipline us? Do you and I've always thought that when God disciplined, it was just this angry person. But as the more I matured, I realized that the more he disciplines us, the more he wants to hug us as well. I think I like that picture, Todd. Yeah, and this is the other thing. I think this is what Paul also brings out. There are times when we want to discipline other people's children, right? You probably been at a point where you've seen other kids act out and you want to discipline them, but you can't. Right? I mean, you could, I guess, but man, there could be some legal issues that would happen if you did. I think that's also the thing about God. He says, no, I don't discipline people who aren't my children. What do you guys think about that? That maybe the reason why people who are against God are, I don't know, the way David put it, they seem to be so much more successful than I am. They seem to just live lives so much better than me. What do you think about the possibility that God, the only people that God disciplines are his children, and the ones that aren't his, I guess they're Satan's responsibility? What do you guys think about that?
He called them illegitimate.
Mhm.
So I wasn't sure quite how to read that.
Well, have you ever had a teacher or a coach that seemed especially hard on you? And then later you find out that he was doing that because he was trying to either toughen you up or trying to make you confident in what you knew and stuff like that. And, later on, they actually tell you, I saw a lot of potential in you, and I just wanted you to get at it, and I wanted to help you to motivate you. So I think in some ways it's similar to God. God cares about us and he wants us to be more than what we are. So he puts these challenges and these trials, or allows them to happen to us so that we can get stronger in our faith.
Very
Right.
true.
Right.
But on the
Yeah.
other hand, those that are his illegitimate children, so to speak, they may seem more successful, and maybe they are now, but what's going to happen in the end?
Mhm.
Right.
They're not going to be successful at that point.
Right.
Right. And I know my mom's here, so she can attest to this, because there are many times when I personally have told both her and my dad, well, how come these people allow, their kids to do this? Why can't you guys allow us when they're doing it and their church members, et cetera, et cetera? And I do see a lot of the wisdom of what they used to do now. Never agreed with them before. I just was just so mad at everything that they would do, and it made no sense because it wasn't fair. And I remember their words. The words were basically, "Yeah, you're our kids, and we don't think you should do that."
I told my kids that if I didn't care, that I wouldn't say anything, but I do care.
Right, right. And as far as that comment about illegitimate, some people have said there is no such thing as illegitimate kids because they're kids, and in some way that's true. But this is the thing: the illegitimacy isn't on God's side. God has created everyone to be their child, but he also gives people the choice. When they say, "I don't want to be your child," then God says, "Okay, then." And I think even that hurts God. That's the thing that Jesus has shown us, is how God hurts when his children say, "I don't want to be your child." I mean, the prodigal son brings that out. And I know I touch a little bit of that in my sermon this Saturday. It's more really the prodigal father, because what the father did was nowhere near normal in trying to accept kids who don't want to be his kids. And I think that's where the illegitimacy is. And for me, that also gives me that also helps me out with people who just choose not to be God's children. And I know, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, remember the picture of Jesus looking over the city and pretty much tears in his eyes saying, I wanted to gather you like a hen gathers her chicks. I wanted to protect you, but you didn't want anything to do with me.
Exactly. One of the things that I wanted to also bring out is this part in verse 21, that Moses himself was so frightened at the sight that he said, "I am terrified and trembling." I wanted to try to see what that's all about, because I want us to read, Pam, if you can read Exodus 20, verse 20. That's Exodus 20, verse 20. And Mom, if you're able to read, I want you to read Exodus chapter 19. And I want you to read, let me see. Uh, 22 and 23. Exodus 19, 22 and 23. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not it. Why can't I find it? All right, go ahead, Mom. Let me see, go ahead, Pam. I'm gonna find the one for Mom, sorry.
Okay,
The verse was,
20, verse 20, chapter 20 of Exodus,
okay.
verses 20.
And Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you, that his fear may be before you, so that it is not a sin, may not sin. So that,
Okay. So here is Moses actually telling the people, don't be scared, right? And the reason he was telling them that was because they were the ones who was scared. So what do you think Moses was talking, or Paul was talking about here when he talks about how Moses was fear and trembling? And I'm sorry, but I can't seem to find the verse for it. So I'm going to have to just quote it for you and have somebody somebody look it up. But what do you think he meant by that? What was Moses scared about if during this time Moses was telling the people of Israel, hey, don't be scared? So there must have been something that happened that got him all scared.
I think he was afraid for his people that they would not obey and that they would be hurt, they would be destroyed.
Right.
I think it's maybe like a parent, you know, when you know that your child could do something wrong and you're just kind of sitting there going, oh, please make the right choice, make the right choice.
Right. So what did they do that would make Moses fear that they would get destroyed?
They turned away from God.
Right. And by the way, that's the verse I was looking for. I thought it was in chapter 19, but it wasn't. See, what happened was as soon as Moses got the 10 commandments, God says, hey, you need to go down. And Moses was like, why? Well, it says, your people, they're stiff-necked. And see, what the people of Israel did was they made a golden calf and they were worshiping the golden calf. And God was saying, let me just make you a great nation, Moses, and let me wipe this people out. I think that's when Moses really got scared, because Moses started pleading with God, and he was pleading with God to, what's the nations are going to tell, what are the nations going to tell you if you decided to, what is that again? If you decided to just wipe out your people, what kind of a God would they think you are? What's going to happen to your, what is that again? Your
name.
Your name, right.
Reputation.
Your what? I'm sorry?
Reputation.
Your reputation. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. What's going to happen with your reputation if you just take these people from Egypt and then they wipe you out? So God says, all right, then just go down there. Now, when Moses went down and he saw this, then he got mad. He was the one who basically smashed the 10 commandments. He kind of lost control when he saw the stupidity of his people. And I think that's why it ends here, that we need to have this attitude. Let us not think that just because the Jesus that we knew died on the cross, that there is no such thing as repercussions or consequences if we reject God. And that's why in verse 28 and 29, I believe Paul says, our God is a consuming fire. That when we decide to receive God's kingdom, we need to be thankful and to please God by worshiping him with holy fear and awe. What do you think holy fear is? What are some of your other translations for that?
Full respect and reverence.
Yeah,
Okay.
reverence.
Full respect and reverence. Yeah, I think God is trying, what Paul is trying to tell us is when it comes to God, many times people would misunderstand his love and mercy as him being weak. Or it's, that he's someone to trifle with. And what Paul is saying is, no, there's an immense power with God. And there are consequences that happens to us when we make that decision to not to not follow him. And if Moses got terrified and scared, Moses who saw God, Moses who continues to talk with God every single day, that's what God told Miriam, because Miriam decided, hey, forget Moses, we're going to do our own thing. And God gave Miriam leprosy. And basically God said, what are you doing? Don't you know that I'm talking directly to Moses? Don't you know that if I wanted to speak to people, I speak to Moses first so that he could speak to you? Why didn't that made you tremble in fear to go against Moses? And I think one of the things that worshiping God, that Paul talks about with worshiping God, is this reverence, is this respect for God and what he's saying, but also for reverence and respect for the people who are trying to draw people to God. Because even as he told his disciples that if people reject you, they're really rejecting me. And I think those are words that we can always hang on to when we do some of the toughest things, which is sharing God with others. Anything else?
Anything else in that chapter?
Yeah, anything else pop out at you in the chapter?
Let's see, I think it was verse 12. If I can go back here and check it out. Oh, yes, 12. Take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. And I have those these tired hands and weak knees, and I'm trying to keep them movable and active so that I can help people in need.
Right. Now, what do you think Paul means when he says take a new grip? Those of you who have other interpretations of this in your translations, what are some of the other things? Because this is the New Living Translation. Anything else come up in any of your other translations? Verse 12. No?
I have the same thing.
Right.
The clear
It
word,
says, go ahead.
clear word says, lift up those drooping hands
Mhm.
and strengthen those weak knees.
Right. The NIV says, yeah, strengthen. That's another word for get a new grip, is strengthen. How can you strengthen yourself when you're weak?
Exercise.
Okay.
Exercise.
Absolutely. Right.
Instead of sitting there and feeling sorry for yourself, get up and move, do something.
Right. Get up and move.
Exactly. That's the thing my therapist told me to do with my knees. Strengthen the other parts, like strengthen my quads, strengthen my what is that again? Calves, strengthen my IT bands. I mean, there are things that I didn't know I had muscles that my therapist, you need to strengthen this in order for your knees to be strengthened. What do you think, Paul, in that illustration, how does Paul want us to strengthen ourselves when we get weak?
Reach out to God.
Be more.
Okay.
I'll be more in tune with God, with reading more of the Bible, and our daily devotion, or start out with a good attitude towards helping people,
Right.
doing exercise.
Right.
Positive.
Right. So when you look at verse 14 to 17, we begin to see what Paul wants us to do to strengthen. And even with verse 13, where it says, mark out a straight path. Verse 14 talks about how we need to live in peace with everyone. It seems like the way we can strengthen each other is, the way we can be strengthened is by strengthening each other. What do you guys think about that? That you would be strengthened in your spiritual walk with God by looking for somebody to strengthen.
Because you forget about your own problems and you're helping someone else.
Yeah. Do you think that works?
Yes.
And you forget about woe is me and start worrying about somebody else.
Right.
And we each have people in our family or our friends that do need help, that we could help them daily or often, and spiritually, and in their need for other things too.
Right. And by the way, this is probably why sometimes our churches are really weak churches, is because people don't know how to strengthen each other. And I know you brought up things like you need to pray, we need to, we need to read our Bibles, we need to study about God. And again, the question would be, well, why do we need to do that? And the only thing in this cycle, it seems to me that the greatest blessing of reading God's word is being able to share God's word. And when people, when people are struggling, then it would be good if people in a church can actually be part of a cycle so that they will help those people. And I know there are some churches who that cycle isn't there. If anything, the cycle is, let's try to compete on who looks the best to each other. Let's try to compete for positions. And usually in that church, the most stressed out and discouraged is the pastor, because, or the church leaders, because the thinking is the leaders need to encourage me, but I don't need to encourage the leaders. And because of that, everybody in that church becomes weak. Does that make sense?
There it does.
Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is the thing that Paul wants to bring out. And the last thing I want to bring out, and only because of time, because this chapter, again, one of my favorites, just because there's so much really great principles here that I think is something that we all need to learn, is this whole thing about Esau. Make sure that no one is immoral or godless like Esau. What did Esau do that was so immoral and godless?
I don't think he recognized the value of being blessed with it by his father with the inheritance.
Yeah.
He saw the money part of it, but he didn't see the spirit.
Birthright.
How does that relate to us? What is our birthright? Do we have a birthright? Is it only
Or
firstborn
heaven.
kids who have a birthright? What
I
happens to
think
the
many of
younger
us
one?
are-
That's Elaine and I.
I think many of us are hungry for other things other than spiritual food.
Hmm.
And that's the things of this world, and sometimes we're ready to give up what really is important because we can get what we want right now, the things of the satisfaction here on earth.
Yeah,
And I know I do sometimes get caught up in it.
right. And that's what Paul is really trying. If there's anything we forget about this chapter, it's that. It's easy for us to say, I think I'll give God up for a week or two because, you know, this opportunity is too big to miss. And for Esau, it was just food. And for him, he just thought, I can't live without food. I'm way too hungry. And understandably so. He was hunting. He couldn't find anything to hunt. He wasn't a good cook. His brother was. And at that moment, it seemed to him that was the most important thing was the food. And I think we go through life just like that as well, where it seems like there are things that are so important that if we don't have these things, then we would die or we would miss a great opportunity. And then the first thing to go, because we're going to have to sacrifice something. And the first thing we sacrifice is God, is being a child of God. The first thing we say is, you know what? It's only a week. It's only 2 weeks. It's only a year. You know, some of the things I heard was, you know, I'm only young ones. Or even I'll wait till I retire. I'm a little too busy right now for God. And maybe it was such a great thing, you know, maybe, and that's what Jesus said. Yeah, what if you did gain the whole world, which is totally impossible. But let's say that you did, you by giving your soul up, you gained the whole world. What exactly did you gain? And I think that's what Paul is saying here. Whatever you do, don't do what Esau did. And one of the things that I said, you probably heard me say in the sermon, that, you know, when Jesus introduces himself, when Yahweh introduces himself in the Old Testament, he introduces himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and it's not Esau. Esau lost a lot. And if we were to tell Esau at that time when he came back, you know, we would have said, look, man, just starve to death. It would have been better if you didn't eat at all, which would have never happened. But he says, whatever you do not give up that birthright, because this is an eternity thing. So all throughout eternity, even if Esau makes it to heaven, he will find out throughout generations, God has introduced himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I believe that, you know, when we get to heaven, there's a throne there. Now, I don't know if God will actually introduce himself. Yes, I'm Frendel's God, or I'm Don's God, I'm Todd's God, or I'm, you know, Julia's father, I'm Sherry's father. I think that throughout eternity, let's not ever lose that vision and give it up for what? Maybe a few years of fun And that's the thing I've found out. It's not really that fun. There's even at the most advantageous parts of life, which rarely happens. There's always going to be the pros and cons. But let's say the only thing that happens were the pros. It's not as fun as we think it is. But for God, oh man, I think it's never going to be as fun as we think it is, because it's just so much more than we ever could possibly imagine.
Amen.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'm gonna stop the recording. Thank you for joining us at our prayer and Bible study session as we journey through the Bible one chapter at a time. We realize that you might have some questions or comments on the things that we discussed today. And if you do, please feel free to fill out the form below. Also, if you would like to have your own Bible, please fill out the form below and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time at our prayer and Bible study session.